There's this clip of writer and actress Zoe Lister-Jones discussing creative work on the Rich Roll podcast.
For anyone in any creative pursuit, making something with an audience in mind, to me, is always sort of like the death knell, you know?
I think that's actually very bad advice. Yes, you probably shouldn't have a mass audience in mind when creating art, but you definitely should think of who you're creating that art for. Even if it's just an audience of one, that's fine. But that audience of one cannot be yourself. Why? Because making art is a form of communication. And in order to communicate effectively, you need to know who you're communicating with. You need to know what they know, so you can tell them what they don't know. For example, would it suffice for me to tell you that I'll be calling you right after Tarawih? Or would I first need to tell you what Tarawih is for you to know what time that will be? I think people often conflate style and substance. The style, of course, should be filtered through yourself. It's your voice. It has to come from within to be authentic. But substance should always be focused on the person or people you want to experience your work. Storytelling, at its best, is a dance between the storyteller and the audience. The storyteller needs to give just enough information so the audience can make a connection in their own heads. Too little information and the audience is lost or confused. Too much information and it's boring because they're not an active participant in the dance. When the audience is you, there is no dance, there is no mystery, there is nothing to connect. I suppose you could imagine telling the story to a version of yourself before you knew what the story was. But then, I would argue, that would be a different person and that you actually have a different audience in mind. When people talk about storytelling being an empathy machine, they forget that it doesn't just go one way. Yes, the person experiencing the story gets to momentarily inhabit the life of another. But that's only possible because the person telling the story must have had to embody where the audience would be at every step of the journey in order to create space for that empathy to take hold. The machine, you see, it goes both ways. Recently, I watched Harry Kondabolu's new stand-up special. At some points toward the middle of his set, he made a joke where the punchline involved Joseph, Mary, and Jesus. He then went on a tangent about how some people had taken an issue with him using Christianity as a punchline.
Why don't you talk about your own religion? How come you can't use your own religion for that joke? You don't think I want to?
And then he goes on to explain how the same joke would work with Shiva, Parvati, and Ganesha.
But I can't use that example because nobody knows what the f*** I'm talking about. Gotta explain everything. Oh, Ganesha, is that the monkey one? No, it's not the monkey one. Not the monkey one.
My point is that art is a journey that you as the artist takes the audience on. And in order to take them from A to B, you first need to know if they're actually at A. And if they're not, where exactly they are and how to get them to A. Because leaving an audience that could have been served by your work is not just a disservice to them, it's also a disservice to the work. I don't actually think that Ms. Lister-Jones would necessarily disagree with anything I've said here, because most of the films she's written were directed or co-directed with someone else, which is to say that when she sits down to write, she is, at the very least, thinking of how the director would experience the work. Anyway, my name is Ibrahim, and I make videos about creativity, relationships, and personal growth for artists who are in the beginning of their creative journeys. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of creative minds for more videos like this. And let me know in the comments down below who you have in mind when you're making your art.